Okay, so one of the most important things for us is to be able to test new people who claim to be speaking on behalf of God. And Paul clearly is in that category. So now we have to examine Paul. Okay, now he doesn't have God Yahweh speaking over him at Paul's baptism, saying, "This is my man, and I'm well pleased. This day I've begotten thee," all these things, and then tells it's Transfiguration, John and Peter, listen to him. Paul has none of that. So Paul stands on his own. But even if if it were Jesus we're examining, and Jesus were to contradict God's law, how are we supposed to perceive that? And the answer is in 1 Kings 13, 1 to 29. There's a lesson there. So let's look at this slide here. Paul contradicts God's words in Exodus 20, verses 1 to 2, on who gave the law to Moses. Moses says it was Yahweh, and Paul says it was angels, not God, and uses that as proof why the Galatians should not obey it. Paul in Galatians says specifically that the law given Moses was given by angels to Moses as a mediator and not by God. If we want to go back to following the law, and the Galatians wanted to observe Sabbath, that was one of the two things that Paul's addressing. Paul says we are desiring to submit to those who are no gods, because that's in the Ten Commandments. And he's saying it did not come from God; it came from these angels. And then he excoriates them for wanting to be in subjection again, under bondage is actually the word he uses, to weak and beggarly elements. And in Greek language, the word elements was synonymous with angels, and commentators will point that out. So he is continuing to refer to the angels, but now he's calling them weak and beggarly elements because they are not God, and they are teaching you to obey Sabbath. And so you can disregard that command about Sabbath, not because God's changed his dispensation at all. This is what modern Christians will tell you is why you don't do it. But what was Paul's reason? He's saying it wasn't ever given by God. So the modern dispensationalists don't want to say that, but their man, the guy they're trusting, who taught them not to obey Sabbath, has a very different ground that the dispensationalists are ashamed about because it's so false. But you can't ignore the fact that's what really this all started from. And they're just trying to rationalize some other basis to reject God's law other than the fact he didn't actually give it. But this is a huge, huge point about examining Paul. So in Exodus 20, verses 1 to 7 are the Ten Commandments. And by the way, anytime you want to read them, just remember Exodus 20. And in verse 1 it says, and this is Moses speaking first, and God spoke all these words. So who does Moses think gave the Ten Commandments? God. And then he says, I am the Lord your God, and that's going to be Yahweh your God. Okay, so the quotation tells you it's from Yahweh. There's nothing about angels. And just so you know, there is absolutely not a shred of rabbinic claims or commentaries or anything prophetic or even purportedly prophetic that ever suggested that angels gave the law. Prophetic prior to Paul and also Stephen, the martyr, when he's dying, and Paul is a witness, and Paul is holding the garments. He claims he must have been the source for this claim to Luke that that's the same thing that Stephen said, that the law had been given by angels. Now Stephen's no prophet, and even if he said it, which is dubious, because where is it really coming from? Who would make such an outrageous claim? Only Paul does in his writing. So let's not put words in Stephen's mouth that we don't have absolute confirmation by two witnesses. So the only witness we know that was there is Paul, whom Luke is relying upon. So that doesn't create a doctrine. That doesn't create confirmation. Paul can't be the source of a second person saying the same thing he's saying to try to prove it's true. But think about the fundamental point of Paul. He is saying the law is not done away with. It just was never even given by God. So this is what Christians must face. He isn't just simply contradicting the law. He absolutely eviscerates the law. But let's keep going, and we're going to have to see, how do you test something like this? And this is the lesson of 1 Kings 13, 1 to 29. Okay, so what is this passage about? It is about an otherwise loyal and righteous man of God and he's a prophet of God, a young prophet, deceived by an otherwise old prophet and got severely punished by God. It teaches us that not everyone who claims to be a messenger of God can be trusted despite their titles. In this case, we're told that the person giving this false message to the young prophet was an old prophet. So we're to understand he actually at one time truly had the prophecies of Jesus, of God Yahweh, and that is seemingly moral activity. So he's going to be told to do something. By the old prophet's going to tell the young prophet to do something that just, it's moral. There's nothing amoral about it. So he's going to say, I want to have a casual lunch with you. I just want to eat with you. Okay, however, in context, because God had commanded against this very thing, it can be seen as a deadly sin because it's against the commandment of God. He specifically said not to do this. Just go to this place and come right back and don't do anything. Don't eat it with anyone. Don't do anything else. We'll see what the command was, to be more precise. Also, it is our responsibility to discern if a self-proclaimed message from God is true or false. We can't blame God for allowing a false messenger to interact with us. So it's not God's fault. We can close the door or we can open the door. If you open the door to somebody giving you a message that's contradictory to God, what's going to happen to you? And this will be the lesson. See what's going to happen. See if you can foresee destruction in the path of anyone who accepts the idea that Paul has. And whether they justify it or try to rationalize it by some dispensation or not, we have to face the fact that the person that modern dispensationalists are relying upon, Paul, actually makes a completely outrageously false statement. And now they're still following him, even though they claim that they've invented their own rationale to reach the same conclusion: we don't need to observe Sabbath. Okay, so we know from Deuteronomy 13, 1-10, God allows false prophets to test us, people who would be speaking allegedly on behalf of God, to test us to see whether we love God with our whole heart and mind, because we're to compare it with God's commandments here given today at Sinai, or at any other later time through a verified prophet. So God tests, what's this slide say? God tests us by gullibility. Are we this gullible that you would accept someone who comes along and says God did not give the commandments at Sinai? It was given by angels to Moses and the mediator. Can you be this extraordinarily gullible to even for a second believe this person is speaking on behalf of God Almighty? Even if Paul had been chosen by Jesus Christ, at this point in time is 47 AD. This is 12 or 13 years later. Paul, by his own admission, has been doing nothing between this point, at the Damascus point, all the way to here. He's in Arabia with no telling us what he's been doing for 14 years. He just says 14 years goes by. Okay, so let's say he's been a prophet that entire time, and we have no idea. But if he comes along in 47 in his very first letter says God did not give the law, and that's what this Galatians is, the very first letter. From that point forward, you know he is what? He's an apostate. So even if he had been chosen by the Lord Jesus Christ, which is dubious, okay, for reasons we've stated independently, but just assume it. And then this is the first thing you hear 14 years later. What do you know? You know you are not to follow this person. And that's what, again, what this passage in Kings is going to show us. All right, so we're going to read verses 1-3. Young man of God, a true prophet. Verse 1. Behold, a man of God came out of Judah by Yahweh's word to Bethel. He cried against the altar by Yahweh's word and said, Altar, altar. Yahweh says, he gave a sign the same day, saying, This is the sign which Yahweh has spoken. Behold, the altar will be split, and the ashes that are on it will be poured out. So just so we know, right from the beginning, God is speaking to this man. We do not actually know the man's name. It's never identified, and that could be for what, based on what happens to him later. And by the way, the reason I'm using the World English Bible, it's one of the only Bibles that uses the name Yahweh, so I like that fact. And we can see where the word Yahweh is in the original Bible, but is hidden by the word Lord for improper reasons in 90% of the Bibles. Okay, so now let's look at verses 4-6, and this is the young man of God further proves to be a true prophet himself. When the king heard the saying of the man of God, his hand he put out against him dried up, so that he could not draw it back again to himself. So this is the king's hand is somehow withered. The altar was also split apart. So that miracle that the prophet said would happen happened. The king answered the man of God. He said, quote, now intercede for the favor of Yahweh your God, and pray for me, that my hand may be restored to me again. The man of God interceded with Yahweh, and the king's hand was restored to him again. It became as it was before. So this guy has a split altar, a healed hand, and we are to understand from the First Kings that he is a man of God and is inspired to do these things. Okay, so now we're going to go to verses 7 to 8. In this section, it's the young prophet followed a direct revelation from Yahweh to have no lunch with the king. So let's read this passage. The king said to the man of God, come home with me and refresh yourself, and I will give you a reward. The man of God said to the king, even if you give me half of your house, I would not go in with you, neither would I eat bread nor drink water in this place. For so it was commanded me by Yahweh's word, saying, quote, you shall eat no bread, drink no water, and don't return by the way that you came. So when he sent him off on his mission that day, this was his command. You shall eat no bread, drink no water, and don't return by the way that you came. So he has to come home a different route, but he must not eat any bread, and he must drink no water. So he went another way and didn't return by the way he came to Bethel. So he obeyed God. Okay, so now we're going to find out there's an old prophet in the area, and he's going to seek out the young prophet. Okay, and we don't entirely understand the motivations of the old prophet, but we'll just, that's not part of the story necessarily. Verse 11, now an old prophet lived in Bethel, and one of his sons came and told him all the works that the man of God had done that day in Bethel. They also told their father the words which he had spoken to the king. So now this old prophet knows that the young prophet has said there's a commandment of Yahweh that I cannot eat or drink. Right? That day. 12. The father said to them, which way did he go? Now his sons had seen which way the man of God went, who came from Judah. He said to his sons, saddle the donkey for me. So they saddled the donkey for him, and he rode on it. He went after the man of God and found him sitting under an oak. He said to him, are you the man of God who came from Judah? He said, I am. Okay, now we're going to look at verses 15 to 18, and I entitled this, The Old Prophet Contradicts Yahweh by a Purported Angel Message. Pay attention. Then he said to him, come home with me and eat bread. So he knew what he had already known, had been told by his sons that that was a commandment God had said he should not do. Verse 16, he, the young prophet, said, I may not return with you, nor go in with you. I will not eat bread or drink water with you in this place. For it was said to me by Yahweh's word, you shall eat no bread or drink water there, and don't turn again to go by the way that you came. So he's repeated the commandment of God correctly twice. What does the old prophet said? He said to him, I also am a prophet, as you are. And an angel spoke to me by Yahweh's word, saying, bring him back with you into your house, that he may eat bread and drink water. And it specifically says in the text, he lied to him. So we, the reader, know this prophet is lying to him. But does the young prophet know this? No. Now, a couple of things. That means that just because you are a prophet for some purposes does not mean you are what? Omniscient. God may not be talking to you all the time, because why? He's testing you. He may give you some truth, but now you have to live up to the truth I've given you if you want to go further. So it's not like you have the mind of God wherever you walk. So people, things that are true of Jesus are not true of every prophet. So Jesus has more knowledge than others. But a normal prophet... this young prophet has no prescience or no omniscience. So he doesn't know he's being lied to. Okay. Now, what we're going to learn is from this is the true prophet of God, the young man. He must disobey another true prophet of God who contradicts what came before direct from God. So this was the path that this young prophet's going to take is disastrous because he's going to go against what he knows is the word of God because of this lie he receives. Okay, so now we're going to read verses 19 to 22, and this is the result from obeying the claimed prophet who contradicted Yahweh. Verse 19, so he went back with him, meaning the young prophet, went back with the old prophet, ate bread in his house, there's the violation, and drank water, that's the second violation. As they sat at the table, Yahweh's word came to the prophet who brought him back, meaning the old prophet. So Yahweh does speak to the old prophet. And he cried out to the man of God who came from Judah, saying, Yahweh says, because you have been disobedient to Yahweh's word and have not kept the commandment which Yahweh your God commanded you, but came back and have eaten bread and drank water in the place for which he said to you, eat no bread, drink no water, your body will not come to the tomb of your fathers. Now that's a real problem for Jewish people, is, the honor is to be buried with your fathers in a grave next to your parents or whatever. And he wouldn't be allowed to do that. He's going to die in a different place than he should have, than he would have wanted. That's his punishment. Okay, so now we're going to see that Yahweh's true word to the old prophet is fulfilled. So God is truly speaking through this old prophet later, but not when he's lying. Now, this is talking about the old prophet. After he, the old prophet, had eaten bread and after he drank, he saddled the donkey for the prophet whom he had brought back, meaning the young prophet. When he had gone, now this is the young prophet. When the young prophet had gone, a lion met him by the way and killed him. That's why we have a little picture there of a lion with the dead young prophet at his feet. A lion met him by the way and killed him. His body was thrown on the path, and you can see he's on the path. The old prophet took up the body of the man of God and laid it on the donkey. So you see there's the donkey in the picture. And brought it back. He came to the city of the old prophet to mourn and to bury him. He laid his body in his own grave. So the old prophet gives his own grave to the young prophet. And they mourned over him, saying, alas, my brother. All right, so here's some of my notes on this passage, things that we can grasp. The young prophet repeatedly rejected disobeying Yahweh by quoting words the young prophet heard from Yahweh. That was a good discipline. And by the way, like the Ten Commandments, who spoke those commandments? What does Moses say who it was? It was Yahweh. What does Paul say? No, there are no gods. So Paul wouldn't quote the Ten Commandments to protect himself, but we would. That's a big difference, isn't it? The young prophet was deceived by a contradiction of Yahweh's words. So somebody comes along and says, no, God didn't say that. He told me something else later. He said, you can do this. What is Paul doing? He's coming along later and telling you, you don't have to do Sabbath. You don't have to rest on Saturday. Just do whatever you want. Work all day long. Do whatever you want. That's what Paul says. And more importantly, if you try to do that, you're in bondage to the law given by angels who are no gods, weak and beggarly elements. What are you doing, you foolish Galatians? That's what he says about just simply people wanting to rest on Sabbath. Kind of off the wall stuff, if you ask me. But this is what we're supposed to believe is from God, right? This is what our church is inspiring them to a dispensationalist idea that Paul came with a superseding gospel of salvation, that Jesus' gospel now became defunct. Okay, next one. The person who deceived him was a true prophet. So that's what's remarkable here, is that true prophet can sin. And actually, there's a verse in the Hebrew Gospel of Matthew that got dropped. And Jesus actually says in one verse, he says, and there were prophets who were known to have had the prophecy of Yahweh and then themselves sinned. So a lot of people just assume since you're a prophet of God, you can never sin. Well, this older prophet apparently was jealous. That's all I can put together. We're not told what his motivations were, but it seems like he was jealous of the young prophet's success. Or for some reason he wanted to test him by lying to him and using his own reputation as a prophet. The old prophet was using his own reputation as a prophet to lead the young prophet astray. Seems pretty diabolical. Whatever his reason, we don't know. It's not told to us. Really, what we're supposed to focus on is, why did the true prophet disobey God? He probably thought, hey, eating food, drinking, this is not so bad. So, maybe God did speak to him. But he should have said to himself, well, why would God give me commands and then him talk to this guy to tell me to violate them instead of give me the commands directly. So he didn't use any logic. He was what? Gullible. He wasn't testing the experience. So listen, if what the old prophet was saying was true, the young prophet should have said, then why didn't Yahweh tell me that? That's all he would have had to say, and he would gone to himself, of course. If God wanted to countermand it, he can tell me. He told me earlier, I'm a prophet. So there was no barrier to him getting this truth by just going to his prayer closet and praying to Yahweh, am I supposed to eat and drink with this fellow? And until he got confirmation, he should never have done that. He had done it right twice earlier. He's got to keep on the same path. Next point. But the true prophet was lying, attributing the message as from an angel of Yahweh. So again, a true prophet. The old prophet is a true prophet, but he lied. He lied for whatever reason, probably jealousy. So the final question, should the young prophet have known an angel of Yahweh could not contradict Yahweh? Well, that's another thing. Even the old prophet did not dare to say he got the message directly from Yahweh. He was saying, I got the message indirectly. Yahweh didn't tell me this, but an angel of Yahweh told me this. Notice the little clever way he kind of got around contradicting Yahweh. So his lie was to be careful. He didn't attribute it to Yahweh. He attributed it to an angel. And that should have been a clue. So, for example, Paul doesn't claim in Galatians that he's getting this message from anybody. He doesn't even attribute what he's saying to God. Yahweh revealed that only angels gave it to him. For all we know, it was just his own imagination, or he's claiming in later in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, or 2 Corinthians 12, he claims that he's getting revelations on an ongoing basis in the third heaven, and yet it's illegal or illicit for him to repeat them, the actual revelations he's receiving. So somehow he's trying to convince the Corinthians that he's getting revelations directly from somebody who's supposed to be in heaven, revelations in the third heaven. So supposedly it's God or maybe angels, or Paul never actually says who that was in 2 Corinthians 12. He leaves it to kind of be implied vaguely. It could be Jesus, but he never suggests it's Yahweh. So that's another thing about Paul. He's trying to point away, he's taking a path around Yahweh, but he's going to deny Yahweh, gave the law. So he's sort of saying, I received it from Jesus as a way of not having to directly contradict Yahweh. And that seems to have deceived a lot of people, as, so he's claiming this, but he doesn't actually say God says it was given by angels. He's just affirming it and leaving it up to us to conclude where is he getting this contradiction of Yahweh from. Okay, that's the end of episode 1. Please look for part 2, and be interesting. We're going to go deeper now into Galatians.